included us. You should serve us properly. We are not animals.
Picture this. 30,000 feet in the air, a 9-year-old black girl stands in the aisle of a passenger plane, her small hand gripping a cell phone, her voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence like a knife. Grace Johnson looks directly at flight attendant Tricia Morrison and says 5 words that will change everything. Uncle Carter, you need to hear what's happening on your airline right now. The color drains from Tricia's face. Her mouth opens then closes. Around them, passengers start pulling out their phones, fingers swiping to camera mode, sensing that something significant is unfolding. Some lean into the aisle to get a better view. Others exchange glances that say they've been waiting for this moment, hoping someone would finally speak up. Grace's simple act of courage is about to expose a pattern of humiliation that's been happening on this route for months. What she witnessed in just a few hours will lead to a termination, federal charges, and a reckoning that will force an entire airline to confront what it's been ignoring. But to understand how a 9-year-old girl ended up holding her uncle, a billionaire CEO, on the phone while confronting discrimination at 30,000 feet, we need to go back to where this day began. Grace Johnson is 9 years old, and this is her first time traveling alone. She lives on the south side of Chicago with her mother, Lena, a nurse who works double shifts at Cook County Hospital just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. Grace knows the sound of her mother's alarm clock going off at 4:30 in the morning. She knows the exhaustion in Lena's eyes when she comes home at midnight, too tired to eat the dinner Grace saved for her. She knows how to stretch a grocery budget, how to turn off lights to save on the electric bill, how to be quiet when her mother finally gets a few hours of sleep on Sunday afternoons. Lena raised Grace to be observant, responsible, mature beyond her years. When you're a single mother working yourself to the bone, your child grows up fast. Grace helps with bills, sorting them into piles. Urgent, can wait, ignore for now. She's learned to read her mother's stress levels, to know when to ask questions and when to just give her a hug. But there's one topic that always brings a particular kind of tension to their home. Uncle Carter. Grace's uncle, her mother's younger brother, the one who made it big. The one they don't talk about. Grace has pieced together the story from overheard phone conversations and arguments with her aunt. Carter Johnson left Chicago 20 years ago with nothing but ambition and a business degree. He built an airline from the ground up, turned it into a multi-billion-dollar company, became the kind of success story that gets featured in magazines. But success came with distance. Carter stopped calling. Stopped visiting. The family watched him on television giving interviews about innovation and customer service while he missed his own mother's birthday, his sister's struggles, the everyday reality of the family he left behind. Lena never says it outright, but Grace can hear the hurt underneath the pride when someone mentions her brother's name. He made it out, but he didn't bring anyone with him. Still, when Grace needed an emergency contact for this trip to visit Grandma Mariah in Atlanta, Lena wrote down Carter's name and personal cell phone number on the card. Grace asked why if they never talked to him. Lena just said, he's still family. If something happens he should know. Grace tucked that card into her backpack, never imagining she'd actually use it. This morning, Lena walked Grace to the airport, her nurse's scrubs still on from the night shift because she didn't have time to go home and change. She held Grace's face in both hands at the security checkpoint and said, "Remember your manners, baby. Be polite, stay in your seat, don't cause any trouble." There was something extra in her voice, a weight that Grace understood even if she couldn't name it. Her mother was preparing her for a world that wouldn't always be kind, teaching her to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. Teaching her survival. Grace promised. She meant it when she said it. Now, walking through O'Hare International Airport with her small rolling suitcase, backpack over her shoulders, Grace feels the flutter of excitement mixed with nerves. She's never flown alone before. She's never been away from her mother for more than a night. But Grandma Mariah is getting older and Lena can't get time off work, and somebody needs to spend spring break with her in Atlanta. Grace volunteered. She's 9 but she's responsible. She can handle this. At gate B-17 she boards SkyReach Airlines Flight 447. The moment she steps onto the plane she notices everything. That's Grace's gift and sometimes her burden. She sees things. The first-class cabin spreads out in front of her with wide leather seats that look more like armchairs, each passenger having enough space to stretch out completely. The overhead bins are larger. The lighting is warmer. A flight attendant stands at the entrance to first class, greeting passengers with a smile so bright it could be in a commercial. That flight attendant is Tricia Morrison, though Grace doesn't know her name yet. Tricia is in her 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, makeup perfect, uniform crisp. She greets a businessman named Peter with genuine warmth. "Welcome aboard, sir. Can I take your jacket? We'll be serving a hot breakfast after takeoff, and I'll make sure you get your coffee right away." Peter thanks her, settles into seat 2A like he owns it. Next comes Angelina, a young professional woman in an expensive pantsuit, pulling a designer carry-on. Trisha's smile doesn't dim. "Good morning. Let me help you with that bag. You're in 3C window seat, perfect for working or napping." They chat briefly about the weather, about Angelina's connection in Atlanta. It's pleasant, human, the kind of interaction that makes flying feel less like being processed and more like being cared for. Grace walks past them, heading toward economy. She's in seat 32B. As she passes Trisha, still standing at the first-class threshold, something shifts. Trisha's eyes flick to Grace, taking in her worn sneakers, her backpack with the fraying strap, her brown skin. The smile doesn't exactly disappear, but it transforms into something else. Something tight. A professional mask with nothing warm behind it. Trisha gives a brief nod, barely perceptible, and turns her attention back to the first-class passengers. Grace notices. Of course she notices. The economy cabin is different. Where first class felt spacious, this feels compressed. Seats packed closer together, overhead bins already filling up, passengers jockeying for space. The lighting is harsher, fluorescent. Grace makes her way down the narrow aisle, pulling her suitcase behind her, excusing herself past people already seated. Row 32. Seat B, middle seat. Grace's heart sinks a little. She's stuck between two strangers for the next 2.5 hours. But when she reaches her row, she finds a kind face waiting. An elderly black woman is already seated in 32A, the window seat. She's probably in her 70s, with silver hair, warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a gentle smile that immediately puts Grace at ease. "Well, hello there, sweetheart," the woman says, her voice carrying the soft drawl of someone raised in the South. "Looks like we're going to be neighbors for this flight. I'm Gift." "I'm Grace," she replies, struggling to lift her backpack into the overhead bin. Gift starts to stand to help, but Grace manages it, not wanting the elderly woman to strain herself. She slides into the middle seat, buckles up, arranges her small purse under the seat in front of her. Gift pulls out a roll of butterscotch candies from her purse. "Would you like one, honey? Always helps my ears during takeoff." Grace accepts gratefully. As she unwraps the candy, Gift asks about her trip. Where's she headed? Is she visiting family? Is someone meeting her in Atlanta? Grace explains about Grandma Mariah, about traveling alone for the first time, about being a little nervous but mostly excited. Gift listens with the full attention of someone who genuinely cares, asking follow-up questions, sharing that she's headed home to Atlanta after visiting her daughter in Chicago. Around them, the economy cabin fills with passengers. Grace notices the demographics immediately. Where first class was predominantly white, back here the faces are different. Black families with young children. Brown-skinned passengers speaking Spanish to each other. Elderly folks who look like they saved up for this flight. Young people in casual clothes. Some passengers look tired before the flight even begins, wearing the exhaustion of people who work hard for everything they have. Others are excited, probably traveling for something special. The energy is different too. Less entitled ease, more cautious hope. A few rows ahead, in seat 27C, Grace spots a black man in his 30s settling into an aisle seat. His name is Sean, though Grace doesn't know it yet. He's dressed in a sharp business suit, charcoal gray with a crisp white shirt, tie perfectly knotted. His leather briefcase looks expensive. He pulls out a laptop covered in business stickers, airport lounge access tags on his luggage. Everything about him says frequent flyer, professional, someone who should probably be in first class. As passengers continue boarding, Sean makes a phone call. Grace can hear parts of it from her seat. "Hey baby, yeah, I'm on the plane now. Flight's on time." Pause. "No, same as always. I'm in 27C. Another pause and his voice drops, frustration creeping in. "I know, baby. I requested the upgrade 3 times. They said the system wouldn't let them process it. Same thing happened last month." His wife must be saying something sympathetic because Sean's jaw tightens. "I've got platinum status. I've flown this route 12 times this year already. But somehow the system never works when it's time for my upgrade." He laughs, but there's no humor in it. "Yeah, I know. What can you do, right? Look, I gotta go, they're about to close the doors. Love you. Kiss the kids for me." He hangs up, and for just a moment before he puts his professional mask back on, Grace sees something in his face. Resignation. The specific exhaustion of someone who's fought this battle before and knows he'll fight it again and the outcome won't change. He's learned not to make a scene, not to push too hard, not to be that black man who causes problems over an upgrade. It's easier to just accept it, smile, stay quiet. Grace watches him open his laptop and start working, already compartmentalizing his frustration. Next to her, Gift has noticed too. She leans over slightly and whispers to Grace, her voice carrying decades of recognition. Some things never change, sweet girl. Some things never change. There's a sadness in Gift's words that Grace doesn't fully understand yet but can feel. It settles over her like a weight, the understanding that what she just witnessed, what Gift is alluding to, is part of a pattern much bigger and older than this airplane. The overhead announcement crackles to life. The captain welcomes everyone aboard Flight 447 to Atlanta, gives the weather report, estimates arrival time. Flight attendants begin their safety demonstration. Grace watches Trisha move through the first-class cabin, personally checking each passenger's seatbelt, asking if they need anything before takeoff. She's attentive, patient, present. When Trisha enters economy for the safety check, her pace quickens. She barely makes eye contact. She doesn't ask if anyone needs anything. She just walks through, glancing at seatbelts, moving efficiently toward the back of the plane. When she passes Grace's row, she doesn't acknowledge either Grace or Gift beyond a quick visual confirmation that they're buckled in. Grace looks out the window as the plane pushes back from the gate. Chicago sprawls below, her city, her home, getting smaller. She thinks about her mother, probably on the train by now, heading home to sleep for a few hours before her next shift. She thinks about Grandma Mariah waiting for her in Atlanta, probably already cooking something special for dinner. She doesn't think about Uncle Carter at all. Why would she? He's a stranger with the same last name, a name on an emergency contact card, a ghost in her family's history. Grace has no idea that in less than 2 hours she'll be calling that number. That her uncle's voice will be the one that brings justice to this plane. That her courage will expose what so many have tried to ignore. But right now, she's just a 9-year-old girl accepting a butterscotch candy from a kind elderly woman, preparing for her first solo flight, trying to remember her mother's words. Be polite, stay in your seat, don't cause any trouble. If you're already gripped by Grace's story and want to see how this unfolds, hit that subscribe button right now because what happens next will leave you speechless. And let me ask you this. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and struggled with whether to speak up or stay silent? Drop your answer in the comments below. The plane levels off at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dings off. And Grace Johnson is about to learn that sometimes, the most troublesome thing you can do is refuse to stay quiet when you witness injustice. 20 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign chimes off. The plane has reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, settled into that smooth glide where the engines hum steadily and the world below becomes abstract. For most passengers, this is when the flight truly begins, when you can finally relax, pull out a book, close your eyes, or in Grace's case, observe everything happening around you with the sharp awareness of a child who's learned that details matter. Trisha Morrison and another flight attendant, a younger woman with red hair whose name tag reads Jennifer, begin the beverage service. They start in first class as they always do. Grace can see them through the gap between seats, her view partially obscured but clear enough. She watches Trisha roll the beverage cart down the first-class aisle, and it's like watching a performance, a carefully choreographed dance of hospitality. Trisha approaches Peter, the businessman in seat 2A. Her smile is radiant, genuine, the kind of smile that makes people feel valued. Good morning, sir. Can I offer you something to drink? We have a full selection today. Her voice carries warmth, enthusiasm, the tone of someone who genuinely enjoys her work. Peter looks up from his tablet. What kind of wine do you have? And here's where Trisha shines. She doesn't just rattle off a list. She leans in slightly, engages fully. We have a wonderful selection today. For reds, we're featuring a Californian Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, very smooth with notes of blackberry and oak. We also have a Pinot Noir, lighter, more fruit-forward, perfect if you prefer something less bold. For whites, there's a Chardonnay, buttery and rich, and a Sauvignon Blanc that's crisp and refreshing with citrus notes. We also have champagne if you're celebrating something special today. Peter considers this, clearly pleased by the attention to detail. I'll take the Cabernet, thank you. Trisha's smile widens. Excellent choice. I'll pour that for you right away. Would you like any snacks to go with it? We have mixed nuts, cheese and crackers or fruit. Just the nuts, thanks. Trisha pours the wine into a real glass, not plastic, sets it on a cocktail napkin on his tray table with care, places a small dish of warmed mixed nuts beside it. There you go, sir. Enjoy, and please let me know if you need anything else at all. This interaction takes maybe 2 minutes. 2 minutes of undivided attention, personalized service, human connection. Grace watches all of this. Her 9-year-old brain is cataloging every detail, the tone of voice, the body language, the time spent, the care taken. 2 rows back, Trisha reaches Angelina in seat 3C. Same brilliant smile, same engaged presence. Good morning. What can I get for you to drink? Angelina looks up from her laptop. Could I get sparkling water with lemon, please? Absolutely. Would you prefer Perrier or San Pellegrino? San Pellegrino would be perfect. Trisha nods. Wonderful. I'll be right back with that for you. She disappears briefly to the galley and returns with a small tray, on it a glass filled with ice, a bottle of San Pellegrino and 3 lemon wedges arranged on a small plate. She sets the entire tray on Angelina's table. I brought you extra lemon in case you like it really citrusy. And here's the full bottle so you can control how much bubbles you want. Angelina's face lights up. Oh, thank you. That's so thoughtful. My pleasure. Are you working on something important? I can make sure no one disturbs you during the flight if you'd like. They chat for another minute about Angelina's presentation in Atlanta, about the Wi-Fi quality on the plane, about the best coffee shops near the convention center. It's personal, attentive, the kind of service that makes you feel like more than just a ticket number. Grace absorbs all of this. She's watching through the gap in the seats, her eyes tracking every movement, every smile, every gentle placement of glass and napkin and lemon wedge. This is how flight attendants are supposed to act, she thinks. This is what good service looks like. Her mother has told her about hospitality, about how nurses are supposed to treat patients with dignity and care. This matches that description. The beverage service continues through first class. Every passenger receives this same level of attention. Trisha asks about preferences, offers options, brings everything with care and presentation. She laughs at someone's joke. She remembers that the man in 5B mentioned he was traveling for his daughter's wedding and asks if he's excited. She's not just serving drinks, she's creating an experience. Then Trisha and Jennifer finish with first class. The cart rolls past the curtain that separates the cabins, crosses that invisible but very real boundary between the passengers who paid extra and everyone else. And something happens. Something Grace can see even from her seat in row 32. Trisha's entire demeanor shifts. It's not dramatic. She doesn't suddenly scowl or snap at anyone. It's subtler than that, which somehow makes it worse. Her shoulders tense up, pulling toward her ears. Her smile, that brilliant warm smile, fades into a neutral expression, professional but cold. Her eyes, which had been making contact, engaging with passengers, now focus on the cart, on the drinks, on anything except the people she's serving. The energy around her changes. Where before she seemed to have all the time in the world, now there's an urgency, a desire to get through this as quickly as possible. She starts down the economy aisle. Beverage? She asks the first passenger in row 10, barely looking up. Could I get? The passenger starts. We have Coke, Diet Coke, Sprite, ginger ale, orange juice, apple juice, coffee, tea, water. Trisha rattles off the list mechanically, no enthusiasm, no descriptions, just information delivered to be gotten through. I'll take a Coke, please. Trisha grabs a plastic cup, fills it with ice and Coke, hands it over without a napkin, moves on. The entire interaction takes maybe 15 seconds. No smile. No enjoy. No human warmth. She moves faster now, cart rolling, asking the same question over and over. Beverage? 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 When passengers start to answer, she's already interrupting with the list of options, cutting them off, moving things along. In row 14, an elderly black man, probably in his 70s, politely raises his hand. He's dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, clearly put effort into looking nice for his flight. When Trisha reaches him, he asks, "Excuse me, miss, what kind of coffee do you have?" Trisha doesn't pause in her movements, grabbing cups, organizing the cart. Her answer comes flat, clipped. Regular or decaf. That's it. No description of the blend, no mention of cream or sugar options, no warmth in her voice. Just 4 words, regular or decaf, that's it. The elderly man nods slowly, and Grace can see something in his face, a flicker of disappointment or maybe resignation. Regular, please. Trisha pours coffee into a plastic cup, hands it to him without looking at his face, without offering cream or sugar, without the care she gave to Peter's warmed nuts and wine glass. The man has to ask, "Could I get some cream and sugar?" Trisha sighs, barely audible but there, and hands him several packets without a word. No eye contact. No pleasantries. No humanity. Grace watches this from row 32, her analytical mind already comparing what she's seeing to what she saw just minutes ago in first class. The difference is stark, undeniable. The cart moves closer to Grace's section of the plane. She watches Trisha reach Sean's row 27. Sean, the professional in the business suit, the man with platinum status who couldn't get his upgrade, looks up from his laptop as Trisha approaches. "Could I get orange juice, please?" His voice is polite, professional, carrying none of the frustration Grace heard when he talked to his wife earlier. Trisha grabs a plastic cup, fills it with orange juice from a small bottle, and then instead of carefully placing it on Sean's tray table like she did with Peter's wine, like she did with Angelina's sparkling water, she slams it down. Not violently enough to cause a scene, but hard enough that the orange juice sloshes up, spilling over the rim onto the tray table. Droplets splash onto Sean's sleeve. For a moment, Sean stares at the spill, at his now damp sleeve, at Trisha's back as she's already moving on without a word of apology, without even acknowledging what happened. His jaw tightens. Grace can see him debating something internally, weighing whether to say something, whether to call her back, whether to demand the basic courtesy of an apology. He decides against it. He pulls a napkin from his briefcase, wipes up the spill, dabs at his sleeve and returns to his laptop. The resignation on his face is somehow more painful than anger would have been. Grace's heart starts beating faster. She's 9 years old, but she understands what she's witnessing. This isn't just different service levels based on ticket class. This is something else. Something uglier. The cart reaches Grace's row. Gift, seated next to Grace in the window seat, orders ginger ale. Trisha grabs a can and a plastic cup, but unlike with Angelina's San Pellegrino where she opened the bottle and poured it carefully, unlike with Peter's wine where she presented it perfectly, Trisha hands Gift the unopened can and the cup separately. Gift is 70-something years old with arthritis in her hands. Grace watches the elderly woman struggle with the can's tab, her fingers trembling with the effort, unable to get enough grip to pop it open. The sharp metal edge cuts into her finger slightly and she winces. Trisha is right there. She sees the struggle. She could offer to open it, could take 2 seconds to pop the tab like she would for any first-class passenger without being asked. Instead, she watches Gift struggle for a moment and then moves on to take Grace's order, completely indifferent to the elderly woman's difficulty. Grace orders apple juice and receives the same treatment. Unopened can, plastic cup, no assistance, no care. As Trisha moves past their row, Gift finally manages to open her ginger ale, her finger red where the tab cut into it. She catches Grace's eye and gives her a sad smile that says she's used to this, that this is nothing new, that you learn to open your own cans and expect nothing more. Grace's mind is racing now. She's connecting dots, seeing patterns, understanding something that adults have probably tried to shield her from or maybe hoped she wouldn't notice yet. But Grace notices everything. The beverage service continues through economy. Trisha maintains this cold, rushed efficiency. No warmth. No personalization. No time. Just beverage after beverage, handed over with mechanical indifference, the absolute minimum of service required. When Trisha finally reaches the back of the plane and disappears into the rear galley, Grace feels something tight in her chest. She wants to tell herself she's imagining things, that maybe Trisha is just tired, that economy service is naturally faster because there are more passengers. But she can't make herself believe that. The difference was too obvious, too consistent, too intentional. Gift leans over and whispers, "You okay, sweetheart? You look upset." Grace nods but doesn't trust herself to speak yet. The plane continues its journey toward Atlanta. Passengers settle into their flights, reading, sleeping, working. The cabin fills with the ambient sounds of travel. Conversations, crying babies, the rustle of magazines, the hum of engines. An hour into the flight, the meal service begins. In first class, Grace watches through her gap in the seats as Trisha and Jennifer wheel out a different cart, this one emanating the smell of hot food. Real meals on real plates with metal silverware. Trisha approaches each first-class passenger with a menu of options. "Good afternoon, sir," she says to Peter. "For our meal service today, we have your choice of a herb-roasted chicken breast with seasonal vegetables and rice pilaf, or a vegetarian pasta primavera with sun-dried tomatoes and basil. We also have a fresh garden salad and dinner rolls with butter. What sounds good to you?" Peter considers. "Do you know if the chicken is gluten-free?" Trisha doesn't hesitate. The chicken itself is gluten-free, but the coating has a light flour dusting, so I'd recommend the pasta if you're avoiding gluten. Our pasta is rice-based, completely gluten-free, and I can make sure your salad doesn't have croutons. "Perfect, I'll take the pasta." Wonderful choice. And to drink with your meal? This level of care, this attention to dietary needs, this patient accommodation continues through first class. Each passenger receives options, has their preferences honored, gets their meal served on actual dishware with cloth napkins. Then the cart moves to economy. The meal service here is different. Pre-packaged sandwiches in plastic wrap. Bags of chips. Cookies. Small bottles of water. Everything processed, everything wrapped, everything designed for maximum efficiency and minimum effort. Tricia moves through the economy aisle with the meal cart, and that rushed, mechanical energy is back. She doesn't offer choices because there are none. She doesn't ask about dietary restrictions because the options are take it or leave it. She hands out sandwiches like she's dealing cards, no ceremony, no care. Turkey or ham? Turkey or ham? Turkey or ham? Over and over, the same question, barely waiting for answers before moving on. Most passengers just accept what they're given. They know this is how economy works. You don't get choices. You don't get hot meals unless you pay extra. That's the airline industry standard, and nobody expects different. But what happens next isn't about the quality of the food or the difference between classes. What happens next crosses a line that has nothing to do with ticket prices and everything to do with basic human dignity. In row 19, a young black woman named Elena sits with a toddler on her lap. The little boy, maybe 2 years old, is having a hard time. He's tired, uncomfortable in the cramped space, crying with that persistent whine that only overtired toddlers can produce. Elena is doing everything she can to comfort him, bouncing him gently, singing softly, offering him a pacifier he keeps spitting out. She looks exhausted, her hair escaping from a ponytail, her shirt bearing the stains of previous toddler incidents. This is clearly a difficult flight for her. Her tray table is down because she'd been trying to distract her son with a coloring book before he melted down. Now she's juggling a squirming, crying child in both arms, trying to soothe him, one hand supporting his back, the other wiping his tears. Tricia reaches Elena's row with the meal cart. Elena looks up, clearly frazzled, clearly at her limit. She manages a tired smile and says, "I'm so sorry, could you please just set it on the tray table? My hands are full." It's a reasonable request. A polite request. Any human being with basic empathy would understand the situation. Overwhelmed mother, upset child, no free hands to receive food. Setting a wrapped sandwich on a tray table takes zero extra effort. But something happens in Tricia's face. Her expression hardens. Her eyes go cold. For just a flash of a second, Grace sees something ugly there, something that's been lurking beneath the surface of this entire flight. What happens next seems to occur in slow motion, though it takes only a second or two. Tricia picks up a wrapped turkey sandwich from her cart. Instead of leaning forward those extra few inches to place it on Elena's tray table, instead of showing even the smallest measure of care or accommodation, Tricia tosses it. She tosses the sandwich from about a foot away like she's throwing a frisbee or tossing trash toward a bin. The sandwich hits the tray table. The surface is small, the sandwich wrapped in slippery plastic. It bounces once and tumbles off the edge, falling directly into Elena's lap, onto her already stained shirt, wedging between her body and her crying toddler. The entire cabin section goes quiet. It's one of those moments where the ambient noise doesn't actually stop, but somehow the silence feels deafening because of what just happened. And then Tricia speaks. 2 words that will echo in Grace's mind, that will be the catalyst for everything that follows. 2 words delivered with such casual cruelty that they seem to hang in the air like smoke. There you go. Fetch. Fetch. Like you'd say to a dog. Like Elena is an animal being thrown scraps. Like this black mother trying to comfort her crying child deserves to be humiliated for the crime of asking for basic accommodation. The word hangs there. Elena freezes completely. Her face, already tired and stressed, transforms into something else. Humiliation floods her features, turning her cheeks hot with shame that she doesn't deserve but feels anyway. Her eyes fill with tears that she blinks back rapidly because she's still holding her son, still has to function, still has to get through this flight. But Grace can see the way Elena's whole body seems to shrink, the way her shoulders curl inward, the way she looks down and won't meet anyone's eyes. Around them, passengers react in different ways. Some pretend they didn't hear. They suddenly become very interested in their phones, their books, the safety card in the seat pocket. They exercise the skill that many people develop of looking away from injustice, of not getting involved, of telling themselves it's not their business or maybe they misheard or maybe it wasn't that bad. Others heard clearly and know exactly what happened, but they freeze. Their faces show discomfort, maybe even anger, but they don't speak. They don't call Tricia out. They don't ask if Elena is okay. They witness and stay silent. Sean, several rows ahead, heard it. His jaw clenches so tight that the muscle jumps. His hands curl into fists on his laptop keyboard. For a moment, it looks like he might stand up, might say something, might finally push back against the pattern he's been enduring all flight. But then his eyes drop. He looks away. The weight of past experiences, of knowing what happens when black men confront white women in positions of authority, of calculating risks and consequences, keeps him in his seat. Next to Grace, Gift heard it too. Her eyes close, not in sleep but in pain, in recognition. Her face carries the expression of someone who's heard words like that before, probably many times over her 70-some years, who knows the particular sting of being treated as less than human, who understands exactly what Elena is feeling right now. Gift's lips move in what might be a prayer or might be a whispered apology to a stranger for a cruelty she had no part in but somehow still feels responsible for. And Grace, 9-year-old Grace with her sharp eyes and her mother's lessons about dignity and her child's sense of right and wrong that hasn't yet been dulled by adult cynicism, Grace watches everything. She sees the sandwich in Elena's lap. She sees Elena's trembling hands as she tries to retrieve it while still holding her now quiet toddler, because even the child seems to sense something terrible happened. She sees Trisha move on to the next row without apology, without acknowledgement, without even a flicker of recognition that she just dehumanized another person. Grace's heart pounds in her chest. Her hands ball into fists. Everything she's witnessed over the past hour and a half suddenly crystallizes into perfect, painful clarity. The different greetings at the door. The warm engagement in first class versus the cold efficiency in economy. The wine descriptions versus regular or decaf, that's it. The carefully placed drinks versus the slammed orange juice. The open sparkling water versus the sealed ginger ale that Gift had to struggle with. And now this moment that crossed from unequal service into outright cruelty. Grace understands now. This isn't about ticket prices or service levels. This is about something much older, much deeper, much more painful. This is about who gets treated like a human being and who gets told to fetch. Gift opens her eyes and looks at Grace. The elderly woman can see the wheels turning in the young girl's mind, can see the anger and confusion and hurt building there. She reaches over and gently places her weathered hand on Grace's clenched fist. "Baby," Gift whispers, her voice heavy with decades of experience, "eat your snack. Don't pay it any mind." But Grace can't unsee what she's seen. She can't unhear what she's heard. Her mother's voice echoes in her head, the last thing Lena said at the security checkpoint. "Remember your manners, baby. Be polite, stay in your seat, don't cause any trouble. Don't cause any trouble. Stay quiet when you see injustice. Keep your head down. Make yourself small. Survive." Those are the lessons that black parents teach their children because they know the world isn't safe for black children who speak up, who challenge authority, who refuse to accept mistreatment. Those lessons come from love, from a desperate desire to keep your child safe in a world that won't automatically protect them. Grace understands why her mother said those words. But sitting here, watching Elena wipe tears from her eyes while pretending to adjust her son's shirt, watching Trisha continue down the aisle like nothing happened, watching an entire cabin of people choose silence over solidarity, Grace feels something building inside her that's stronger than the fear of causing trouble. She thinks about her mother working double shifts, coming home exhausted, and still having to deal with patients who treat her like she's less competent because of her skin color. She thinks about the way Lena's voice sounds when she talks about Uncle Carter, hurt mixed with pride, abandoned but still protective. She thinks about Gift's whispered words, "Some things never change," delivered with the exhaustion of someone who's been waiting a lifetime for change that never comes. And 9-year-old Grace Johnson makes a decision. She reaches down to her backpack under the seat in front of her. Her fingers find the emergency contact card with her uncle's name and personal cell phone number. The card her mother included just in case something happened, never imagining this would be the something that mattered. Grace pulls out her phone, the basic model her mother gave her for emergencies. She stares at the card, at the numbers written in her mother's careful handwriting. Gift notices. "Child, what are you doing?" Grace looks at her, and Gift sees something in the young girl's eyes that makes her breath catch. Determination. Courage. The kind of moral clarity that only children possess because they haven't yet learned all the reasons why speaking up is dangerous, why causing trouble has consequences, why sometimes you have to stay quiet to stay safe. "Something wrong," Grace says simply. "And my mama also says if you see something wrong and stay quiet, you're part of the problem." Gift's expression shifts from concern to something else. Sad pride maybe. Fear mixed with hope. She knows what Grace is about to do, knows the courage it takes, knows the risks involved. She also knows she can't stop her and maybe shouldn't try. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to choose between staying silent and speaking up, drop a comment below and tell me what you did. And if this story is resonating with you, hit that subscribe button because what Grace does next will restore your faith that one voice can make a difference. Grace unlocks her phone, her small fingers steady despite her pounding heart. She looks at the number one more time, takes a deep breath and starts to dial. In row 19, Elena has finally composed herself, though her eyes are still red. She's managed to retrieve the sandwich, to wipe her shirt, to quiet her son. But the humiliation still sits on her like a weight, visible to anyone who looks closely enough. Trisha has moved further down the aisle, continuing her mechanical meal service, probably already forgotten what she said to Elena, or maybe never thought it mattered in the first place. The plane continues its journey to Atlanta, 35,000 feet above a world that's about to learn that sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truth. Grace's finger hovers over the call button. She thinks one more time about her mother's warning, "Don't cause any trouble." Then she thinks about the word fetch, and presses call. Grace sits in seat 32B, that middle seat between Gift and a stranger, and her mind is working overtime. She's not just a passenger anymore, not just a 9-year-old girl on her first solo flight. She's become a witness, and witnesses carry responsibility whether they want to or not. Over the past hour and a half, Grace has been cataloging everything with the precision of someone who's learned that details matter, that patterns reveal truth, that if you pay attention, you can see what others pretend isn't there. And what she's seen has assembled itself into an undeniable picture. She thinks about the greetings when passengers first boarded. The way Trisha's face lit up for Peter and Angelina, genuine warmth radiating from her smile, her voice musical with welcome. Then the way that same face went flat when Grace walked past, how the smile transformed into something mechanical, obligatory, empty of any real human warmth. Grace had felt the difference even then, that subtle shift in energy that told her she wasn't quite welcome in the same way. She thinks about the beverage service. The way Trisha described wine options to Peter like she was a sommelier at a fancy restaurant, her voice full of enthusiasm and knowledge, taking time to explain flavor profiles and origins. Then the way she rattled off drink options in economy like she was reading from a boring script she'd memorized years ago and resented having to repeat. The contrast in vocal tone alone was stark. Warm and engaged versus flat and rushed. Helpful versus simply functional. Grace replays in her mind the physical interactions. The way Trisha carefully placed Peter's wine glass on his tray table, setting it down gently on a napkin, her movements deliberate and careful. The way she presented Angelina's sparkling water on a small tray with extra lemon wedges, actually handing her the items, making physical contact through the exchange, treating the service as an interaction between two human beings. Then Grace thinks about how Trisha slammed Sean's orange juice down on his tray table hard enough that it spilled. No careful placement. No gentle setting down. Just a quick, hard motion that showed zero regard for the drink or the person receiving it. Grace remembers the droplets of orange juice on Sean's sleeve, the way he stared at it for a moment, the resignation that passed over his face as he made the decision not to say anything, not to call her back, not to demand even a basic apology. She thinks about Gift's ginger ale can, handed over unopened, forcing the elderly woman to struggle with the tab while Trisha stood right there watching, completely capable of opening it but choosing not to. Grace remembers how Trisha had opened Angelina's San Pellegrino without being asked, had poured it for her, had made everything easy and pleasant. But Gift got a sealed can and indifference. Gift got to struggle with arthritic fingers while a flight attendant who could help simply didn't. And then there's the physical distance. Grace has noticed this too, the way Trisha maintains space between herself and the black passengers in economy. When serving white passengers, even in economy, Trisha stands closer, leans in slightly, creates the proximity that signals engagement and attention. But with black passengers, she keeps her distance, serves from as far away as her arm can reach, creates a physical buffer that communicates something without words. She doesn't want to be close. She doesn't want contact. Grace thinks about how Trisha touched the items she gave to white passengers. Her fingers made contact with the glasses, the napkins, the bottles. She handed things directly to people, creating that brief moment of human connection through the transfer of objects from one hand to another. But she threw things to black passengers. The sandwich to Elena. The sealed can to Gift. Even Sean's orange juice, slammed down rather than handed over. Objects tossed or dropped rather than given, creating distance, avoiding the simple human contact of a direct hand-to-hand exchange. The pattern is undeniable. It's not subtle to Grace because she's been watching with the clear eyes of someone who hasn't yet learned to explain away cruelty, who hasn't yet developed the sophisticated mental gymnastics that adults use to avoid seeing what makes them uncomfortable. Gift leans over, her voice gentle but carrying the weight of experience. Baby, eat your snack. Don't pay it any mind. It's advice given from love, from a desire to protect Grace from the pain of carrying this knowledge, from the burden of seeing injustice clearly. Gift has lived 70-something years watching this same pattern play out in different settings, on different planes, in different restaurants and stores and hospitals and schools. She's learned the survival skill of not letting it destroy you, of eating your snack and getting through the flight and making it home in one piece. She's learned that paying it mind, dwelling on it, fighting against it often just leads to more pain with little change. But Grace can't unsee what she's seen. That's not how observation works when you're 9 years old and the unfairness of the world hasn't yet been normalized for you. The images play in her mind on repeat. Elena's face when the sandwich fell in her lap. The word fetch hanging in the air. Gift's eyes closing in painful recognition. Sean's clenched jaw and forced silence. The casual cruelty of it all, delivered with such ease that it's clearly not new, clearly not an aberration, clearly a pattern that's been happening for a long time. Grace's mind makes connections to her own life, drawing parallels that help her understand what she's witnessing in a broader context. She thinks about her mother Lena, coming home from double shifts at Cook County Hospital. Grace remembers specific nights like the one 3 months ago when Lena came through the door and just stood there in the hallway for 5 minutes, still in her scrubs, staring at nothing. When Grace asked what was wrong, Lena had tried to smile and say she was just tired. But later that night, Grace heard her mother on the phone with her aunt, her voice breaking as she described a patient's family member who had demanded a different nurse, saying they wanted someone more experienced, which was code for not wanting a black nurse. Lena had been a nurse for 15 years. She was the most experienced person on the floor that night. But experience didn't matter to people who saw her skin color first and her competence never. Grace thinks about the exhaustion in her mother's voice during that phone call. Not just physical tiredness from a long shift, but soul-deep weariness from having to prove herself over and over, from being treated as less capable, less trustworthy, less deserving of basic respect. The same exhaustion Grace now sees in Elena's face, in Sean's resignation, in Gift's whispered advice to just ignore it. She remembers her third-grade teacher last year, Mrs. Patterson. Grace loved school, always had her hand up to answer questions, always did her homework carefully, always tried her best. But she started noticing a pattern. Mrs. Patterson called on the white students first. Always. When multiple hands were raised, her eyes would scan the room and consistently land on Emma or Jake or Sophie before they ever found Grace or the other black and brown students in the class. And when Grace did get called on, there was something different in Mrs. Patterson's tone. A slight surprise when Grace gave the right answer as if it was unexpected. A quicker dismissal, a faster thank you before moving on, versus the elaboration and praise white students received for the same correct responses. Grace had mentioned it to her mother once. Lena's face had done something complicated, cycling through anger and sadness and resignation before landing on a tight smile. Just keep doing your best, baby, she'd said. Work twice as hard, be twice as good, and don't give them any reason to overlook you. Which wasn't really an answer to Grace's question about why she was being overlooked in the first place, but it was the answer Lena had, the survival strategy passed down through generations because what else could you do? All of these experiences, all of these moments that Grace had filed away in her mind, suddenly connect to what's happening on this plane. They're all part of the same thing. The same pattern of being seen as less than, treated as less deserving, expected to accept cruelty with silence. And something crystallizes in Grace's 9-year-old mind with perfect, painful clarity. This is wrong and someone needs to say so. Not someone eventually. Not someone in some abstract future when conditions are better or the timing is right or it's safer to speak up. Someone now. Someone on this flight. And if none of the adults around her are going to be that someone, then maybe it needs to be her. 30 minutes later, Tricia and Jennifer return with the beverage cart for refills. This is common on longer flights, a second pass through the cabin offering drinks to passengers who might be thirsty after their meal. Grace watches them start in first class again, same routine, same warm service. When they reach economy, Tricia's demeanor shifts into that familiar pattern. Rushed, mechanical, minimally engaged. She reaches Sean's row. Sean looks up from his laptop, polite as he's been throughout this entire flight despite the spilled juice, despite the denied upgrade, despite everything. Excuse me, could I get another orange juice, please? Tricia stops, and her face does something that makes Grace's stomach tighten. She sighs, not quietly but loudly enough that passengers in nearby rows can hear it. It's a sigh of annoyance, of being put out, of inconvenience. Then she says, her voice carrying a sharp edge, "We're running low on juice." Not, "I'll check if we have more." Not, "Let me see what we have available." Just a flat statement that carries the clear implication: you're asking for too much, be satisfied with what you already got, stop making demands. Sean's face shows a flicker of embarrassment, like he's done something wrong by asking for a second drink on a 2.5-hour flight. "Oh, okay. Water is fine then." Trisha hands him a small bottle of water without another word and moves on. Grace watches this interaction from her seat, and she's already angry about the dismissive way Sean was treated, the public sigh designed to shame him for having the audacity to request a common beverage. But what happens 5 minutes later makes that anger crystallize into something sharper. The beverage cart has continued down the aisle and is now in row 15. A white passenger, a woman probably in her 50s with blonde hair and a pleasant smile, flags Trisha down. "Excuse me, could I get an orange juice?" Anne Grace watches, her eyes locked on the scene as Trisha's face brightens. "Of course. Let me grab that for you." Her voice is cheerful, accommodating. She reaches into the cart, pulls out a bottle of orange juice, pours it into a cup with ice, and hands it over with a smile. "Here you go. Anything else I can get for you?" "No, this is perfect. Thank you so much." "My pleasure." Grace's hands ball into fists so tight her fingernails dig into her palms. There was no shortage. The juice didn't magically reappear in the 5 minutes between Sean's request and this woman's. Trisha lied. She lied directly to Sean's face, used a fake scarcity as an excuse to deny him something, and then served the exact same item to a white passenger moments later with a smile and pleasantries. It wasn't about the juice running low. It was about who was asking for it. Gift notices Grace's clenched fists, the tension radiating from the small body next to her. The elderly woman has lived long enough to recognize righteous anger when she sees it, and she sees it now in this 9-year-old's face. She reaches over, her weathered hand gently covering Grace's fist. "Child, I know that look." Gift's voice is quiet, meant only for Grace. "Don't do anything that'll cause you trouble." It's the same advice as before, but more urgent now because Gift can see Grace moving past observation into action, can sense the decision forming in the young girl's mind. Grace turns to look at Gift, and her voice comes out steady, determined, carrying a moral certainty that adults often lose somewhere along the way to survival. "My mama always says if you see something wrong and stay quiet, you're part of the problem." Gift's expression does something complicated. Her eyes shimmer with unshed tears. Her mouth trembles slightly before settling into a sad smile. There's pride there, fierce and aching, the kind of pride that comes with knowing someone is about to do something brave and necessary and potentially dangerous. There's also fear, the bone-deep fear of someone who's seen what happens when black people, especially black children, challenge white authority. But underneath it all is something that looks like hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe this time will be different. That maybe this child's courage will spark something that changes the pattern instead of just resulting in more pain. Gift squeezes Grace's hand gently and doesn't say anything else. She doesn't tell her to stay quiet again. She doesn't try to protect her from the consequences of speaking up. She just squeezes her hand in a gesture that communicates, "I see you, I understand you, I'm with you even if I'm scared for you." Grace turns back to face forward, and her mind is racing through an internal struggle that's intense despite her young age. Maybe because of her young age, because 9-year-olds feel everything with an intensity that hasn't yet been dulled by years of compromise and rationalization. She's 9 years old. She's alone on this plane, no parent or guardian to back her up, no adult authority figure who's obligated to protect her or take her side. She's surrounded by adults, dozens of them, and they've all chosen silence. Sean, a grown man with platinum status and a business suit, didn't fight back when his juice was spilled. Elena, a mother, accepted being told to fetch without calling for a manager or demanding an apology. Gift, with 7 decades of life experience, advises ignoring it. Every adult on this plane has made the calculation that speaking up isn't worth the cost, that causing trouble brings more problems than solutions, that the system is bigger than any individual voice and fighting it is futile. If all these adults have resigned themselves to this treatment, what can a 9-year-old possibly do? Grace's mother's words echo in her head, clear as if Lena were sitting next to her. "Remember your manners, baby. Be polite, stay in your seat, don't cause any trouble. Don't cause any trouble." It's a plea born from love and fear, from a mother who knows the world is not safe for her black daughter, who knows that trouble for black children can escalate into danger faster than it does for white children, who wants desperately to keep her baby safe even if that means teaching her to stay small and quiet. Grace understands why her mother said those words. She loves her mother fiercely and trusts her guidance. Lena has kept them safe, kept food on the table, kept a roof over their heads despite working herself to exhaustion. If Lena says to avoid trouble, there must be good reasons. But then Grace thinks about that word again. Fetch. The way it sounded in Trisha's voice, casual and cruel, like it was nothing. Like reducing a struggling mother to something less than human was just another part of the service routine. She thinks about Elena's face. The way humiliation flooded her features, the way her whole body seemed to shrink, the way her eyes filled with tears she couldn't afford to shed because she was still holding her son, still had to function, still had to endure the rest of this flight surrounded by people who witnessed her degradation and did nothing. She thinks about the way Gift closed her eyes when it happened. Not in surprise, not in shock, but in recognition. An old, familiar pain surfacing again, a wound that never quite healed being reopened by a single word. How many times had Gift heard words like that in her 70-something years? How many times had she been made to feel less than human and had to just eat her snack and not pay it mind? Grace thinks about Sean's clenched jaw, the frustration he swallowed, the anger he buried, the dignity he maintained while being treated with none. About the choice he made to stay silent, to wipe up the spilled juice and move on, because he's learned through experience that fighting back as a black man can cost him more than a flight upgrade. She thinks about her mother's exhaustion, about Mrs. Patterson's subtle dismissals, about every small and large injustice that people tell you to ignore, to get over, to not make a fuss about because making a fuss causes trouble and trouble brings consequences. But what are the consequences of silence? What happens when everyone stays quiet, when everyone decides that avoiding trouble is more important than confronting injustice? The trouble doesn't go away. It just gets to continue unchallenged. It gets to become normal. It gets to be the way things are, and anyone who suffers from it is expected to just endure it with grace. Grace's hands unclench slightly. She takes a deep breath. Her heart is pounding, but her mind is becoming clear. She reaches down to her backpack, still tucked under the seat in front of her. Her fingers find the front pocket where she keeps important things. Her phone, her boarding pass, a photo of her and her mother, and the emergency contact card. She pulls out the card, stares at it in her small hands. The white cardstock has her mother's careful handwriting on it. Name, Carter Johnson. Relationship, uncle. Phone number, 10 digits written in blue ink. Grace has never called this number. She's never even met Uncle Carter, not that she can remember. He's a ghost in her family's story, a name that brings complicated emotions every time it's mentioned. Her mother's estranged brother who made it big and left everyone behind. Grace knows the bare outline of the story from overheard conversations and carefully worded explanations. Carter and Lena grew up poor on the south side of Chicago, raised by their mother Mariah after their father left. Carter was smart, ambitious, determined to escape poverty. He got scholarships, went to college, got a business degree, started working in the airline industry. He climbed the corporate ladder fast, made the right connections, took risks that paid off. 20 years ago, Carter started his own airline, SkyReach Airlines. Started small, regional routes, but he had vision and timing and enough capital from investors who believed in him. The airline grew. It expanded. It became profitable, then successful, then a major player in the industry. Carter Johnson became a CEO, then a millionaire, then a billionaire. His face appeared in business magazines. He gave TED Talks about innovation and entrepreneurship. He was the American success story, the kid from nothing who made it to everything. But somewhere in that journey he stopped calling home. Stopped visiting Chicago. Stopped being present for his mother's birthdays, his sister's struggles, his family's everyday reality. He sent money sometimes, Lena had mentioned that once. A check here and there, probably enough to feel like he was helping without actually having to be involved. But money isn't presence. Money isn't showing up. Money isn't being family. Grace remembers an argument she overheard 6 months ago between her mother and her Aunt Denise. They were in the kitchen, thought Grace was asleep, and their voices had risen in frustration about something. Aunt Denise had been saying that Lena should call Carter, ask for help, ask for more money, use the family connection. He's a billionaire, Lena. He could change your whole life with what's pocket change to him. And Lena's voice, tight with hurt and pride, Carter's too big for us now with his airline company. He made his choice 20 years ago. I'm not going to beg him for scraps. It's not begging, it's family. Family shows up, Denise. Family calls. Family doesn't forget where they came from. Carter forgot. Or maybe he just doesn't care. Either way, I'm not calling him. Grace had filed that conversation away, understanding that Uncle Carter was a source of pain for her mother, that his success somehow made the distance worse rather than better, that being related to a billionaire while working double shifts to make rent was its own special kind of hurt. But Lena still put his name on the emergency contact card. Still wrote down his personal cell phone number in her careful handwriting. Still designated him as the person to call if something happened to Grace, despite all the hurt and distance and years of silence. Grace stares at that number now. She knows her uncle owns an airline. She's just not entirely sure which one. But she's sitting on a plane right now, and planes have their names written on things. She looks up at the overhead bin, sees the logo embossed there, SkyReach Airlines. Her heart skips. This is Uncle Carter's airline. This plane, this flight, this crew that's been treating passengers so differently based on the color of their skin, it's all part of the company her uncle built and runs. The irony is almost too much. She's experiencing discrimination on her own uncle's airline, being served by flight attendants who work for her estranged billionaire uncle. Grace has never called him. Doesn't really know him. Has no idea if he'll even answer a call from an unknown number, or if he'll care about what she has to say, or if he's become so removed from everyday reality that this won't even register as important to him. But she knows one thing: he owns this airline, which means he has power here. Power to change things, power to hold people accountable, power to make this matter. Grace unlocks her phone with trembling fingers. The screen glows in her hands, waiting for her decision. She looks at the contact card again, at the 10 digits that connect to an uncle she's never met, a family member who's been absent her whole life. What if he doesn't answer? What if he doesn't believe her? What if he doesn't care? What if calling him just causes trouble without actually fixing anything? What if she's about to break her mother's heart by reaching out to the brother who abandoned them? What if this makes everything worse? But what if staying silent means Elena never gets an apology? What if it means Sean continues getting denied upgrades he's earned? What if it means Gift spends the rest of her life closing her eyes in painful recognition of indignities she's supposed to just accept? What if Grace's silence right now is permission for this pattern to continue forever? Grace thinks about what her mother actually said, the full quote that she invokes when Grace faces moral questions. If you see something wrong and stay quiet, you're part of the problem. Lena says that. Lena, who also told Grace not to cause trouble, who lives in the complicated reality of teaching her daughter both to be brave and to be safe, to stand up for what's right and to protect herself from a world that might punish her for doing so. Maybe both things can be true. Maybe Grace can honor both lessons. Maybe she can cause the right kind of trouble, the kind that leads to justice instead of just more pain. Grace makes her decision. Her fingers, small but steady now, begin to dial the number from the card. Each digit she presses feels significant, like she's not just making a phone call but crossing a threshold, stepping into something bigger than herself. Around her, the plane continues its journey. Passengers read and sleep and work. Tricia and Jennifer have finished the refill service and returned to their stations. The ambient hum of engines and conversation fills the cabin. Nobody's paying attention to a 9-year-old girl in seat 32B except Gift, who watches with held breath and clasped hands. Grace presses the final digit. The number is complete. Her thumb hovers over the call button. This is the moment. After this, there's no taking it back. After this, whatever happens will happen, for better or worse. She thinks one more time about her mother's warning, don't cause any trouble. Then she thinks about the word fetch, and everything it represents, all the cruelty and dehumanization that people are expected to endure in silence. Grace presses call. The phone rings. Once, twice, 3 times. Each ring feels like an eternity. Grace's heart pounds so hard she's sure Gift can hear it. What is she even going to say? How do you tell a stranger, even if he's technically family, about something like this? How do you explain what she's witnessed in a way that makes him understand, that makes him care, that makes him act? 4 rings. 5. Maybe he won't answer. Maybe this was a foolish idea. Maybe she should hang up before. The ringing stops. A voice comes through the phone, deep and distracted, the voice of someone important and busy who's answering an unknown number with mild annoyance. This is Carter. Grace's breath catches. Her mouth goes dry. Every word she'd planned to say evaporates from her mind. She's suddenly very aware that she's 9 years old, that she's never met this man, that she has no idea how to do this. But Elena's face flashes in her mind. The word fetch echoes in her memory. And Grace finds her voice. It comes out smaller than she wanted, shakier than she'd like, but it comes out. Uncle Carter? This is Grace. Lena's daughter. Your niece. The silence on the other end is thick, heavy with surprise. Grace can almost hear her uncle's mind working, processing this unexpected call, trying to place who she is. Then his voice changes completely. The distracted annoyance vanishes, replaced by immediate concern, by an emotion that sounds startlingly like fear. Grace? Baby girl, is everything okay? Is your mama all right? The shift in his tone catches Grace off guard. He sounds genuinely worried, genuinely concerned. Whatever distance exists between Carter and his sister, whatever hurt and resentment have built up over 20 years of absence, it's clear in this moment that he still cares enough to panic at the thought that something might be wrong with Lena or her daughter. Mama's fine, Grace says quickly, not wanting him to worry about the wrong thing. Then she takes a breath and says the words that will change everything. But Uncle Carter, I'm on one of your planes right now. Flight 447 to Atlanta. And something really bad is happening. If this story is moving you, if Grace's courage is inspiring you, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens when Uncle Carter hears what's been going on will make you believe that justice is still possible. And I want to know, if you were in Grace's position, would you have made that call, or would you have stayed quiet? Tell me in the comments. On the other end of the phone, Carter Johnson, CEO of SkyReach Airlines, billionaire entrepreneur, the uncle Grace has never met, goes completely still. And when he speaks again, his voice carries an intensity that makes Grace understand that maybe, just maybe, she called the right person. Tell me everything, Grace. Tell me exactly what happened. And Grace, 9-year-old Grace, who was told not to cause trouble, who was supposed to stay quiet and eat her snack and endure injustice in silence, begins to speak her truth. Grace unbuckles her seatbelt with fingers that won't quite stay steady. Her heart is hammering so hard against her ribcage that she's certain everyone around her can hear it, a drumbeat of nerves and determination that seems louder than the airplane engines. She glances at Gift, who gives her a small, encouraging nod, eyes still shimmering with that mixture of pride and fear. Grace takes a deep breath, grabs her phone, and stands up. The aisle feels longer than it did when she boarded, stretching out before her like a challenge. She makes her way toward the back of the plane, past rows of passengers who don't look up from their books and tablets and sleep, oblivious to the fact that a 9-year-old girl is about to change the entire trajectory of this flight. Her legs feel shaky, but she keeps moving, one foot in front of the other, until she reaches the back galley area. It's a small space, somewhat private, tucked away from the main cabin. Grace positions herself in the corner where she won't be immediately visible to passing flight attendants, where she can have a moment of relative quiet to make the most important phone call of her young life. Her hands are trembling as she pulls out the emergency contact card one more time, even though she's already memorized the number. She just needs to see it written there in her mother's handwriting, needs that tangible connection to home, to the person who raised her to see injustice and speak truth. Grace unlocks her phone. The screen seems impossibly bright in her nervous hands. She opens the keypad and begins to dial, each number a commitment, each digit bringing her closer to a point of no return. Her thumb hovers over each number for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary, her brain still processing the magnitude of what she's doing, still offering her one last chance to change her mind, to hang up, to go back to her seat and eat her snack and not cause trouble. But she doesn't change her mind. She dials the full number and presses the call button. The phone begins to ring. The sound is jarring in her ear, too loud, too real. This is actually happening. She's actually calling her estranged billionaire uncle, a man she's never met, to report what's happening on his airline. The absurdity of it hits her for a moment. Who does she think she is? She's 9 years old. She's nobody. Why would he listen to her? The phone rings a second time. Grace's free hand grips the edge of the galley counter to steady herself. Her breathing is shallow, quick. She realizes she has no idea what she's going to say when he answers. How do you start a conversation like this? Hi, we've never met, but your flight attendant is racist? That sounds ridiculous even in her head. The phone rings a third time. Maybe he won't answer. Maybe this whole thing will be decided for her, taken out of her hands, and she can tell herself she tried without actually having to follow through with. The ringing stops. A man's voice comes through the phone, deep and professional, carrying the clipped tone of someone important and busy who's answering an unknown number during what's probably a packed workday. He sounds distracted, like he's still looking at his computer screen or a document while he answers, giving only partial attention to this interruption. This is Carter. And suddenly Grace's mouth is completely dry. Her prepared words, the ones she'd been mentally rehearsing during the walk to the galley, evaporate entirely. She's frozen, phone pressed to her ear, unable to produce sound. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity but is probably only a second or two. Then her voice comes out and it's shaking barely above a whisper, carrying all the nervousness and uncertainty of a child who's just realized she's way out of her depth. Uncle Carter? This is Grace, Lena's daughter. Your niece. The silence on the other end is absolute. Grace can almost hear her uncle's brain processing this information, trying to reconcile the unexpected call from a niece he's never met, trying to figure out why she's calling him, where she even got this number. The silence lasts 3, maybe 4 seconds, but it feels like forever. Grace's heart sinks. He doesn't remember her. Or worse, he doesn't care enough to. Then his voice comes back and it's completely transformed. The distracted, professional tone is gone, replaced by immediate, intense concern. There's something almost panicked in his voice, a fear that cuts through 20 years of distance and estrangement and lands on the most basic human connection: family. Grace? Baby girl, is everything okay? Is your mama all right? The shift catches Grace completely off guard. She'd expected skepticism, maybe annoyance, possibly confusion. She hadn't expected this raw concern, this instant fear that something terrible has happened to his sister. Whatever complicated history exists between Carter and Lena, whatever hurt feelings and bitter distance has built up over 2 decades, it's clear in this moment that Carter still cares deeply about his sister's well-being. The thought that something might be wrong with Lena or her daughter has stripped away all the professional distance, all the CEO composure, leaving just a brother who's afraid. Grace rushes to reassure him, not wanting him to spend another second in that fear. Mama's fine. Mama's fine, Uncle Carter. Her voice is steadier now, grounded by the need to calm him down. She's okay. I'm okay. I'm not hurt or anything. She can hear him exhale, a long breath of relief. Okay. Okay, that's good. That's... He pauses and she can almost see him in her mind's eye, sitting in some expensive office somewhere, hand to his chest, recovering from the spike of adrenaline that comes with thinking something happened to your family. Then his voice comes back, still concerned but more controlled now. Grace, sweetheart, where are you? Why are you calling me? And here it is. The moment. Grace takes a breath and says the words that will set everything in motion. Uncle Carter, I'm on one of your planes right now. Flight 447 to Atlanta. And something really bad is happening. The quality of the silence that follows is different. It's not confused silence or concerned silence. It's focused silence, the silence of someone whose attention has just locked onto something important with laser intensity. When Carter speaks again, his voice carries a different tone. Still concerned, but now also alert, professional, the voice of a CEO who's just been informed of a problem in his company. What do you mean something bad is happening? Are you safe? Is the plane okay? The plane's fine, Grace says quickly. It's not that kind of bad. It's... She struggles to find the right words, the ones that will make him understand without sounding like she's exaggerating or being dramatic. It's the flight attendant. The way she's treating people. The black passengers. She's treating us different from the white passengers, Uncle Carter. Really different. And it's not just like different service. It's mean. It's cruel. Another pause, and Grace can hear something in the background on his end, maybe typing, maybe him moving to a different location. Grace, I need you to tell me exactly what you've seen. Can you do that for me? Take your time, tell me everything. And so Grace does. With the clarity and directness of a child who hasn't yet learned to minimize injustice, who hasn't yet developed the sophisticated language adults use to soften hard truths, Grace describes everything she's witnessed over the past 2 hours. She starts with the boarding, with the way Tricia greeted the first-class passengers with genuine warmth and smiled at Peter and Angelina, chatted with them, made them feel welcome. Then the way that same smile vanished when Grace walked past, how Tricia's face went flat and cold, how the greeting became perfunctory and empty. Grace describes the beverage service, the way Tricia described wine options to Peter with enthusiasm and knowledge, took time to explain flavors and origins. Then the way she rattled off drink options in economy with no enthusiasm, no descriptions, just mechanical repetition. How she told the elderly black man asking about coffee, regular or decaf, that's it, with no warmth, no eye contact, no patience. She tells him about Sean's orange juice, how Tricia slammed it down on his tray table so hard that it spilled, how juice splashed onto Sean's sleeve, how Tricia just moved on without apologizing, without even acknowledging what she'd done. Grace's voice is matter-of-fact as she describes this, just stating what happened. But there's an undercurrent of anger there that she can't quite suppress. She describes Gift's ginger ale, how Tricia handed the elderly woman an unopened can and watched her struggle with arthritic fingers to pop the tab, how she could have helped but chose not to, how she'd opened Angelina's sparkling water without being asked but made Gift struggle in silence. Then Grace gets to the meal service and her voice changes slightly, becomes quieter, heavier. She describes Elena, the young mother with the fussy toddler, clearly overwhelmed, clearly at her limit. How Elena asked politely if Trisha could set the sandwich on her tray table because her hands were full with her crying child. And then Grace's voice catches for just a second. And then the flight attendant threw the sandwich at her. Just tossed it from like a foot away, and it bounced off the tray table and fell in her lap. And then Grace pauses because this is the part that's hardest to say, the part that's been echoing in her mind since it happened, the single word that crystallized everything into undeniable cruelty. And then she said, "There you go. Fetch." Grace's voice is barely above a whisper now. Like she was talking to a dog, Uncle Carter. She told a black woman to fetch. And everyone heard it and nobody said anything, and that lady just sat there trying not to cry while holding her baby. On the other end of the phone, Grace can hear Carter's breathing change. It becomes heavier, more controlled, like he's working very hard to stay calm. She can hear that he's moved somewhere, a door closing in the background, footsteps, like he's gone somewhere private where he can focus entirely on this conversation. "Keep going," Carter says, his voice tight. "Tell me everything else." So Grace tells him about the second beverage service, about how Sean politely asked for another orange juice and Trisha sighed loudly and said they were running low. Then how 5 minutes later, Grace watched Trisha serve a white passenger in row 15 orange juice with a smile, proving the shortage was a lie, proving she'd denied Sean something she had plenty of just because she didn't want to serve him. Grace doesn't editorialize. She doesn't add her opinions or interpretations. She just states the facts in chronological order, describes what she saw and heard with the precision of someone who's been paying very close attention. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful. There's no exaggeration, no dramatic embellishment, just a 9-year-old girl reporting exactly what happened in front of her. When Grace finishes, there's a moment of silence. Then Carter's voice comes back, and there's something in it that Grace has never heard before because she's never actually talked to her uncle before, but she imagines this is what controlled fury sounds like. "Grace, baby, I need you to stay calm for me. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." Grace's response is automatic, respectful, the way her mother taught her to address adults. "I need you to do something. Can you tell me the flight attendant's name? The one who did all this?" Grace's heart jumps. This is it. This is when it becomes real, when names get attached to actions, when consequences start to form. I think I can find out. Hold on." She pulls the phone away from her ear for a moment, peeks around the corner of the galley to see if she can spot Trisha. The flight attendant is several rows up in the main cabin, probably doing another pass-through to collect trash or check on passengers. Grace can see her name tag from here, but she can't quite read it from this distance. Grace makes a decision. She walks out of the galley, phone clutched in her hand but lowered to her side so it's not obviously a phone call. She moves up the aisle with purpose, like she's heading to the bathroom or back to her seat. She passes row after row, getting closer to where Trisha is working. Trisha is bent over, collecting trash from a passenger in row 22. Grace walks past her slowly, deliberately, her eyes fixed on the name tag pinned to Trisha's uniform. She can see it clearly now, Trisha Morrison, Senior Flight Attendant. Grace continues walking for a few more steps, then turns around and heads back toward the galley, not wanting to seem suspicious, not wanting Trisha to notice that she was checking her name. Once she's back in the relative privacy of the galley area, she raises the phone to her ear again. "Uncle Carter?" Her name is Trisha. "Last name?" Carter's voice is crisp, businesslike now, gathering information. Grace closes her eyes, visualizing the name tag she just read. Morrison. Trisha Morrison. And it said Senior Flight Attendant under her name. She hears typing on the other end, rapid keystrokes like Carter is pulling up information on a computer. Then his voice comes back and it's gone cold in a way that actually makes Grace shiver slightly. It's not angry loud, not yelling. It's the kind of cold that comes from someone who has power and is about to use it. Trisha Morrison, employee number 47392. Been with SkyReach for 8 years. 3 prior complaints filed against her. More typing. Complaints that were apparently never properly investigated. His voice carries disgust now, whether at Trisha or at his own company's failure to address the complaints, Grace can't tell. Maybe both. "Grace, I need you to do something for me. Can you do that?" Grace's stomach flips. She has no idea what he's going to ask, but she's come this far. "Yes, sir. I need you to hand the phone to Trisha." Grace's eyes widen. Her mouth goes dry again. You want me to give her the phone? To talk to you?" "Yes, baby girl. I know it's scary, but I need you to be brave for just a little bit longer. Can you do that? Just walk up to her and tell her someone needs to speak with her, then hand her the phone. Grace's mind is racing. Walking up to Trisha and handing her the phone means confronting her directly, means making herself visible as the person who reported her, means potentially making herself a target. But her uncle is asking and she's already called him, already set this in motion. There's no backing out now. Okay, Grace says, her voice smaller than she wants it to be. Okay, I can do that. That's my girl. I'm right here with you, Grace. You're not alone. Grace takes several deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. Then she walks out of the galley and up the aisle, phone in hand this time, visible and obvious. She's done hiding. She's done staying quiet. Trisha is in the forward galley now, chatting with Jennifer, the other flight attendant. They're laughing about something, completely relaxed, completely unaware that anything is wrong. Grace approaches them, her small frame appearing in the galley entrance. Excuse me, Miss Trisha? Grace's voice comes out quieter than she intended. Someone wants to talk to you. Trisha glances down at Grace with barely concealed annoyance. Her face does that thing it's been doing all flight, that subtle shift from whatever pleasantness she was showing to someone else into cool dismissal when faced with Grace. Sweetie, I'm working. Go back to your seat. She turns back to Jennifer, clearly considering the matter closed, this child dismissed. But Grace doesn't leave. She stays planted in the galley entrance, phone extended toward Trisha. Her voice comes out stronger this time, more insistent. It's my Uncle Carter. He says it's important. Trisha doesn't even look at the phone. She sighs, that same loud sigh she gave Sean, the one designed to make someone feel like they're being unreasonable. I don't have time for. Grace interrupts, and her voice is louder now, carrying into the cabin, loud enough that passengers in nearby rows turn to look. He owns this airline. He really needs to talk to you. The galley goes completely quiet. Jennifer's eyes widen, her head swiveling between Grace and Trisha. The smile falls off her face, replaced by confusion and growing concern. Trisha's expression shifts rapidly, cycling through several emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Annoyance first, then confusion as she processes what Grace just said, then something like fear as the implications start to register. She looks at Grace properly now, really looks at her like she's seeing her for the first time. What? Trisha's voice has lost its dismissive tone, replaced by uncertainty. Grace holds the phone out further, her arms straight, offering it insistently. My Uncle Carter owns SkyReach Airlines. He's on the phone right now and he needs to talk to you. Passengers are definitely paying attention now. Several people in first class have turned around to see what's happening. Others are pulling out their phones, not to use them but just watching, sensing that something significant is unfolding. Trisha stares at the phone like it's a snake, like taking it might bite her. Her face has gone pale. She looks at Jennifer, who just shrugs helplessly, equally confused. Then Trisha looks back at Grace, and there's calculation happening behind her eyes. Is this child lying? Is this some kind of joke? But why would a 9-year-old make up something like this? Trisha's hand trembles slightly as she reaches out and snatches the phone from Grace's hand, not gently, still maintaining some of that aggressive dismissiveness even though her face shows fear. She raises it to her ear, her voice attempting professionalism but not quite achieving it. This is Trisha Morrison, how can I help you? And then everyone in the forward section of the plane hears Carter's voice through the phone. It's loud enough that even Grace, standing a few feet away, can hear it clearly. Loud enough that passengers in rows 1 through 5 can definitely hear it. Loud enough that there's no mistaking who's calling or why. Trisha Morrison, employee number 47392. Is that correct? Trisha's hand holding the phone begins to tremble more noticeably. Her face, already pale, goes almost white. Why, yes, sir. Who is this? This is Carter Johnson, CEO of SkyReach Airlines. His voice is cold, controlled, carrying the weight of absolute authority. And you're going to tell me exactly what happened on this flight. The words hit the galley like a bomb. Jennifer actually gasps, her hand flying to her mouth. Trisha sways slightly like the ground just shifted under her feet. Several passengers who heard the exchange start whispering urgently to their neighbors, and within seconds the news is spreading through the cabin like wildfire. The CEO. A kid called the CEO. About the flight attendant. About something that happened on this flight. Phones come out now, not to use but to record, passengers sensing that they're witnessing something extraordinary, something that might end up on the news or social media. A dozen cameras point at the galley, capturing Trisha's pale face, her trembling hands, the terror that's replaced her earlier confidence. Trisha tries to compose herself, tries to reclaim some professional dignity. Mr. Johnson, I don't know what you've been told, but I assure you. Carter's voice cuts through her attempted explanation like a knife. Don't try to spin this right now. My niece just spent 10 minutes telling me everything that happened on Flight 447. The differential service. The spilled orange juice with no apology. The lie about running low on juice. The sandwich thrown at a passenger. His voice drops even colder. The word fetch used to a black mother. Tricia's face crumbles. Whatever defense she was preparing dies in her throat. She knows she's been caught. She knows exactly what Grace reported because it's exactly what happened, and there's no way to deny it, no way to explain it away. Sir, there must be some misunderstanding. Her voice is weak, desperate. The only misunderstanding, Carter says, his voice loud enough that more passengers can hear it, is how someone with 3 prior complaints for discriminatory behavior was allowed to continue flying, was promoted to senior flight attendant, and was given the opportunity to treat passengers on my airline like they're less than human. Around the galley, passengers are frozen, watching this confrontation unfold. Some faces show satisfaction, finally seeing someone held accountable. Others show discomfort, not used to witnessing consequences happen in real time. Sean has stood up in his seat several rows back, tall enough to see over other passengers into the galley, his face a mixture of shock and something that might be vindication. Elena is visible too, still holding her sleeping toddler, tears streaming down her face, but different tears now. Not tears of humiliation, but tears of relief, of being seen, of someone finally standing up for her. Gift has her hands clasped together like she's praying, her face luminous with emotion, watching Grace stand in that galley like a tiny warrior who just changed everything. Tricia is still trying, still desperately searching for an exit from this. Mr. Johnson, please, if I could just explain. You'll have plenty of time to explain, Carter interrupts, to the HR investigation team, to the FAA if they want to get involved, and possibly to a lawyer depending on how the discrimination complaint process plays out. But right now you're going to do exactly what I tell you. Are we clear? Tricia nods, then realizes he can't see her. Yes, sir. Her voice is barely a whisper. I'm conferencing in Captain Reynolds right now. You're going to hand this phone to him when he comes back to the galley. And Tricia? You're done. You're finished working this flight as of this moment. You'll sit in a jump seat for the remainder of the journey, you won't interact with passengers, and when we land, you'll be escorted off this plane by security. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Tricia's voice breaks on the words. Tears are streaming down her face now, her career collapsing around her in real time, all because a 9-year-old girl refused to stay quiet. Put Grace back on the phone. Tricia extends the phone toward Grace with a shaking hand. Grace takes it, and for just a moment the flight attendant and the child make eye contact. There's something in Tricia's expression, maybe recognition of what she's done, maybe just fear of consequences, maybe hatred at being caught. Grace can't tell and doesn't really care. Grace raises the phone to her ear. Uncle Carter? His voice is completely different when speaking to her, warm again, protective, full of pride. You did so good, baby girl. You were so brave. I'm proud of you. Grace feels tears prick her eyes, not from fear or sadness but from the overwhelming relief of being believed, of being taken seriously, of her voice mattering. What's going to happen now? Now. Carter's voice carries grim satisfaction. Now justice happens. You just sit tight, go back to your seat with Miss Gift and let me handle the rest. I'm making some calls right now that are going to change how this airline operates. Because of you, Grace. Because you were brave enough to speak up. Grace nods even though he can't see her. Okay. I love you, sweetheart. I can't wait to meet you in person when you land. And Grace? Tell your mama I'm sorry it took something like this to reach out. But I'm reaching out now and I'm not letting go again. Grace's tears spill over for real now. I'll tell her. Good girl. Now go sit down and I'll see you soon. The call ends. Grace lowers the phone and turns to find the entire forward cabin staring at her. Dozens of eyes, some admiring, some shocked, all focused on this small 9-year-old girl who just took down a senior flight attendant with a single phone call. Grace walks back down the aisle toward her seat, and as she passes Sean's row, he starts clapping. Just him at first, his hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. Then Elena joins in, juggling her sleeping toddler to free one hand to clap. Then other passengers join, and suddenly the entire economy section is applauding this child who did what they couldn't, who spoke up when they stayed silent, who refused to accept injustice as just the way things are. Grace's face flushes with embarrassment and pride as she makes her way back to row 32. Gift is crying openly now, her weathered face wet with tears, her arms open to receive Grace into a hug as she slides back into her seat. "Oh baby," Gift whispers into Grace's hair. "Oh sweet brave baby. You just changed the world." And maybe she did. Maybe one phone call from one 9-year-old girl on one flight can't change the whole world. But it can change this flight. It can change one airline's policies. It can change the lives of the passengers who witnessed it. It can show other people that speaking up is possible, that justice can happen, that courage matters. The plane continues its journey to Atlanta, but everything is different now. In the forward galley, Tricia Morrison sits in a jump seat, face in her hands, career in ruins. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds is on the phone with the CEO, getting instructions about how to handle the situation when they land. Throughout the cabin, passengers are texting and posting and calling people, spreading the story of what just happened on Flight 447. And in seat 32B, Grace Johnson holds Gift's hand and stares out the window at the clouds below, her heart still racing but her conscience clear, knowing she did the right thing even though it was scary, even though it caused trouble, even though her mother told her to stay quiet. Because sometimes, the most important thing you can do is refuse to stay quiet when you witness injustice. Sometimes trouble is exactly what the situation needs. And sometimes, a 9-year-old girl with a phone and the courage to use it can change everything. If Grace's bravery just moved you to tears, smash that subscribe button because the resolution of this story will restore your faith in justice. And let me ask you, have you ever witnessed something wrong and regretted not speaking up? Tell me about it in the comments because your story matters too. The confrontation in the galley has reached its breaking point. Tricia Morrison stands there with Grace's phone pressed to her ear, listening to her CEO tell her exactly what he knows about her behavior on this flight, and her face has gone from flushed to completely pale, all the blood draining away as the reality of her situation crashes down on her like a wave. Her hand holding the phone trembles so badly that passengers watching can see it shaking from their seats. She tries desperately to compose herself, to summon whatever professional dignity she has left, to find some way to explain or defend or minimize what's happened. Her voice comes out strained, tight with barely controlled panic. "Sir, I don't know what you've been told, but..." Carter Johnson's voice cuts through her attempted explanation like a blade, sharp and final, leaving no room for debate or defense. "I'm conferencing in the captain right now. Grace, take your phone back, sweetheart." Tricia extends the phone toward Grace with a hand that won't stop shaking. Grace takes it and for a brief moment their eyes meet. There's so much in Tricia's expression, fear and anger and humiliation and the dawning realization that her 8-year career just ended because she couldn't treat people with basic human dignity. Grace doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. She just takes her phone and steps back. Grace raises the phone to her ear and can hear her uncle talking to someone else now, his voice professional and clipped, giving rapid instructions. "Captain Reynolds, this is Carter Johnson. I need you to make an announcement immediately. Flight Attendant Morrison is to report to the cockpit. She's relieved of duty as of this moment." There's a pause while the captain must be responding, then Carter continues, "I'll explain everything but I need her removed from passenger interaction immediately. There's been a serious incident of discrimination that I'm documenting right now." Grace can hear the captain's voice in the background, expressing shock and concern, asking questions. Her uncle's responses are measured but firm, walking the captain through what needs to happen, what procedures to follow, what will occur when they land. Then the overhead speakers crackle to life throughout the entire cabin, and Captain Reynolds' voice fills the plane. It's the voice of authority, calm and professional, but there's an undercurrent of something else, tension maybe, or concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. I apologize for the interruption to your flight. We have a situation that requires my immediate attention." He pauses, and in that pause the entire cabin seems to hold its breath. Passengers who were dozing wake up. People pull out earbuds. Everyone pays attention because a captain doesn't make unscheduled announcements unless something significant is happening. "Flight Attendant Morrison, please report to the cockpit immediately." The cabin erupts in whispers. Passengers turn to each other, asking what's going on, speculating about what could have happened. Some of them know because they witnessed the confrontation in the galley or heard Grace's phone call. They start explaining to their neighbors, and the story spreads like wildfire through the cabin. The little girl called the CEO. The flight attendant was discriminating. "Did you see what she did to that mother with the baby? Did you hear what she said?" The whispers grow louder, more animated. Phones come out en masse now. Not to record Tricia's walk of shame, though some do that too, but to text people on the ground, to post to social media, to document that they were on this flight when something extraordinary happened. Within minutes, even before the plane lands, the story of Flight 447 will be spreading across the internet. Tricia Morrison walks from the forward galley toward the cockpit, and it's the longest walk of her life. Every eye in first class is on her. Her face has gone from pale to flushed, bright red with humiliation and anger and fear. She keeps her eyes straight ahead, refusing to look at any of the passengers, refusing to acknowledge their stares. Jennifer, the other flight attendant, watches her go with wide eyes, clearly trying to distance herself, to make it obvious she had nothing to do with whatever happened. Tricia reaches the cockpit door, knocks and disappears inside. The door closes behind her and the whispers in the cabin grow even louder. Grace makes her way back down the aisle to her seat in row 32. The walk back is completely different from any other time she's walked this aisle. Passengers she passes look at her with expressions ranging from admiration to awe to gratitude. Some reach out to touch her shoulder as she passes, gentle pats of encouragement and thanks. She's not invisible anymore. She's not just another economy passenger to be rushed through and dismissed. She's the girl who spoke up. The girl who called the CEO. The girl who changed everything. When Grace reaches row 32 and slides back into her middle seat, Gift is waiting with open arms. The elderly woman pulls Grace into a hug, holding her tight, and Grace can feel Gift trembling with emotion. "You're a brave little girl," Gift whispers into Grace's hair, her voice thick with tears. "Your mama raised you right. She raised you so right." Grace hugs her back, suddenly exhausted from the adrenaline crash, from the fear and courage and intensity of the last 20 minutes. She feels small again, just a 9-year-old who wants her mother, who wants to be home, who's overwhelmed by what she just did. But she also feels something else. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing even when it was hard, even when it was scary, even when every instinct told you to stay quiet and stay safe. The plane continues its descent toward Atlanta. The seatbelt sign chimes on. Flight attendants, not Tricia but the others, move through the cabin ensuring everyone is prepared for landing. The energy in the cabin is electric, charged with the knowledge that something significant just happened, that they were all witnesses to a moment that mattered. 20 minutes pass. The plane is in its final approach, Atlanta visible through the windows, the city sprawling out below them. Then the overhead speakers crackle to life again, and Captain Reynolds's voice fills the cabin once more. "Passengers, I want to speak to you directly about what has occurred on this flight." His voice is serious, carrying the weight of someone who's just had a very difficult conversation in the cockpit and is now tasked with addressing a cabin full of people who deserve answers. It has come to our attention through the brave actions of a young passenger that one of our flight attendants behaved in a manner that is completely unacceptable and contrary to the values that SkyReach Airlines stands for. The cabin goes completely silent. Everyone is listening now, hanging on every word. Tricia Morrison has been relieved of her duties effective immediately. She will be escorted by authorities upon our landing and will face a full investigation for discriminatory behavior. On behalf of SkyReach Airlines, on behalf of myself and this crew, I want to offer our sincerest apologies to anyone who was subjected to inappropriate treatment during this flight. He pauses, and when he continues, his voice carries both regret and determination. What happened today should never have happened. It will not happen again. I have been in direct contact with our CEO, Carter Johnson, who has authorized me to inform you that every passenger in the economy cabin will receive a full refund for this flight. Additionally, you will each receive a voucher for a complimentary round-trip flight anywhere SkyReach operates, along with our sincere apology. This is not who we are. This is not who we will be. We will do better. The cabin erupts, but not in anger or outrage. In murmurs of shock, of appreciation, of validation. Elena, the young mother who was told to fetch, starts crying. She's holding her now awake toddler on her lap, and tears stream down her face, but these are different tears. These are tears of being seen, of being valued, of someone finally acknowledging that what happened to her was wrong and unacceptable. Her son, picking up on his mother's emotion, pats her face with his small hands, and she hugs him close, sobbing into his hair. Several passengers begin to clap. It starts in the back, maybe row 28 or 29, and spreads forward through economy. Not everyone joins in, some people are still processing, still shocked, but enough do that the sound of applause fills the cabin. They're clapping for the captain's response, for the accountability, for the refund and vouchers, but mostly they're clapping because someone finally stood up for them, because their dignity was finally treated as something that matters. Sean, the businessman who was denied his upgrade and had his orange juice spilled on him, sits in his seat and nods slowly. There's something in his eyes that wasn't there before. Not quite hope because he's been disappointed too many times to trust in systemic change from one incident, but something adjacent to hope. Possibility maybe. The recognition that speaking up can lead to consequences, that injustice doesn't always have to be swallowed in silence, that sometimes the system can be pushed to do the right thing. Grace's phone buzzes in her hand. She looks down and sees Uncle Carter's name on the screen. She answers, pressing the phone to her ear. Grace? Baby girl, you still there? Carter's voice comes through, warm and proud and emotional in a way that suggests he's been affected by this as much as anyone. I'm here, Uncle Carter. I'm so proud of you. You have no idea how proud I am. You did the right thing, sweetheart. The hard thing and the right thing, and those are often the same thing. He pauses, and Grace can hear him take a breath, composing himself. When you land, there's going to be a car waiting for you at the gate. A driver will take you directly to Grandma Mariah's house, and I'll meet you there. Is that okay? Yes, sir. Grace's voice is quiet, still processing everything. And baby girl? I'm sorry. Carter's voice cracks slightly. I'm so sorry it took something like this for me to reach out. Your mama and we've got some talking to do. Some fences to mend. I've been a terrible brother and I've missed out on knowing an incredible niece. But I want you to know something, and I need you to really hear this. Okay, Grace whispers. You reminded me today why I started this company. I didn't build SkyReach to be just another airline. I built it because I was tired of being treated like less than, tired of watching my mama get dismissed and disrespected, tired of seeing people like us have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I wanted to create something better. But somewhere along the way I got so focused on the business side, on the expansion and the profits and the quarterly reports, that I lost sight of the people. The actual human beings who trust us to get them where they need to go safely and with dignity. Grace listens, her heart full, as her uncle continues. You didn't just expose one bad flight attendant today, Grace. You reminded me what this company is supposed to be about. You reminded me why it matters. And I promise you I'm going to make changes. Real changes. Not just firing Trisha Morrison, though that's happening. But mandatory bias training for every employee. A passenger advocacy board so people have a real way to report concerns. An independent review of our hiring and promotion practices to figure out how someone with 3 prior complaints made it to senior flight attendant. We're going to be better because you were brave enough to hold us accountable. Grace feels tears streaming down her face now, overwhelmed by the weight of his words, by the recognition that her phone call might actually lead to lasting change, not just punishment for one person but transformation of an entire system. I love you, sweetheart, Carter says, his voice thick with emotion. I can't wait to hug you in person. And tell Gift thank you for me, for watching over you, for being kind to my niece when I wasn't there to be. I will, Grace manages to say. See you soon, baby girl. The call ends. Grace lowers the phone and turns to Gift, who's been listening to Grace's side of the conversation with tears streaming down her own weathered face. He says thank you, Grace tells her, for being kind to me. Gift pulls Grace into another hug, and they sit like that, 2 souls connected by circumstance and courage, as the plane makes its final descent into Atlanta. The landing is smooth. The wheels touch down on the runway with barely a bump, and the plane decelerates, the engines reversing thrust, the whole aircraft slowing until it's taxiing toward the gate at a gentle pace. Outside the windows, Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport spreads out, one of the busiest airports in the world, completely oblivious to the fact that Flight 447 is bringing in a story that will dominate headlines and social media for days to come. The plane reaches the gate. The seatbelt sign chimes off. Passengers begin to stand, reaching for overhead bins, gathering their belongings. But there's a difference in the energy. Usually, deplaning is a rushed, impersonal process, everyone eager to get off and get to their destination. Today, people are moving slower, talking to each other, exchanging contact information, bonding over the shared experience of being on this particular flight. As Grace stands and pulls down her small backpack, passengers around her start approaching. Elena is first, making her way up the aisle with her toddler on her hip. When she reaches Grace's row, she stops and fresh tears stream down her face. Thank you, Elena says, her voice breaking. Thank you for seeing me. For seeing all of us. She shifts her toddler to one arm and reaches out with the other, pulling Grace into a one-armed hug. You're an amazing little girl, and I hope my son grows up to have half your courage. Grace hugs her back, not trusting herself to speak without crying. Sean is next, tall and professional in his business suit, but his eyes are red-rimmed like he's been crying or fighting not to. He extends his hand to Grace and she shakes it, her small hand disappearing in his larger one. You've got more courage than most adults I know, Sean tells her, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for doing what I should have done, what we all should have done. You showed us what bravery looks like. Other passengers stop too. A middle-aged black woman Grace doesn't remember speaking to grabs her hand and squeezes it. Bless you, child. Bless you. An elderly black man tips an imaginary hat to her. You made us all proud today, young lady. Finally, as the aisle begins to clear and it's time for Grace to deplane, Gift stands with her. The elderly woman holds both of Grace's hands in hers and looks into her eyes with an intensity that makes this moment feel sacred. Change starts with people like you, baby, Gift says, her voice quavering but firm. Not with presidents or CEOs or people in power, though they have their part to play. Real change starts with regular people who see wrong and refuse to accept it. With little girls who love butterscotch candies and have the courage to make a phone call. You changed the world today, Grace. Maybe not the whole world, but you changed the world for every person on this plane. And that matters. That matters so much. Gift leans forward and kisses Grace's forehead, a benediction, a blessing, a passing of something important from one generation to the next. Then Gift pulls back and smiles through her tears. Now go on and meet your uncle. Go hug your grandma. And when you see your mama, you tell her that a stranger in seat 32A said she raised a daughter that would make anyone proud. Grace nods, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and picks up her backpack. She follows the line of deplaning passengers up the aisle, through first class where empty seats sit as monuments to privilege and inequality, through the aircraft door where Captain Reynolds stands in his uniform. The captain stops Grace as she's about to step into the jetway. He crouches down to her level, this tall, authoritative figure making himself small to look a 9-year-old girl in the eye. Thank you, he says simply. For having the courage to speak up. For holding us accountable. You made us better today. Grace nods, manages a small smile and continues into the jetway. As she walks up the sloping corridor toward the terminal, pulling her small suitcase behind her, the narrator's voice takes over, reflecting on everything that's transpired, giving context and meaning to the extraordinary events of Flight 447. Sometimes it takes the uncomplicated moral clarity of a child to expose what adults have learned to tolerate. Adults develop sophisticated mechanisms for accepting injustice. We tell ourselves it's not that bad, that it's just how things are, that speaking up will cause more problems than it solves, that we're probably misinterpreting things anyway. We learn to rationalize, to minimize, to look away. We call this wisdom, maturity, picking our battles. Sometimes it is those things. But sometimes it's just cowardice dressed up in adult language. Grace didn't see complexity where there was only cruelty. She didn't balance consequences where there was only injustice. She didn't perform the mental gymnastics that adults excel at, the calculations about risk versus reward, about whether this particular incident was worth fighting over, about whether her voice would even matter. She simply saw human beings being treated as less than human, and she refused to accept it. That's the gift and the curse of childhood innocence. The gift is moral clarity unclouded by years of compromise and resignation. The curse is that children who speak up are forced to grow up faster, to lose that innocence by confronting the ugliness that adults have learned to navigate around. But Grace didn't lose anything today. She gained something. She learned that her voice matters, that courage is contagious, that one person speaking up can catalyze change in ways that silence never can. The story of Flight 447 spread faster than the plane traveled. Before Grace even reached the terminal, passengers were posting to social media, texting friends and family, calling news outlets. Within hours, the story would be trending on Twitter, covered by CNN and Fox News and every outlet in between. Video clips of the confrontation recorded on passenger phones would go viral. Think pieces would be written about discrimination in the airline industry, about the courage of children, about corporate accountability. But those larger conversations, important as they are, almost miss the point. Because the real story of Flight 447 isn't about one bad flight attendant or one responsive CEO or one brave child, though those are all parts of it. The real story is about the dozens of people on that plane who were reminded that silence is a choice, and courage can come in the smallest packages. Tricia Morrison was terminated from SkyReach Airlines before the plane even finished taxiing to the gate. She would face federal charges for discrimination, charges that carry real penalties and consequences. The investigation would uncover a pattern of behavior spanning years, 3 prior complaints that were inadequately addressed, and a culture that prioritized avoiding conflict over protecting passengers. Tricia would lose her career, her reputation, and potentially her freedom, all because she thought she could treat people as less than human without consequences. But this story isn't really about Trisha either. She's a symptom, not the disease. SkyReach Airlines, true to Carter Johnson's word, implemented sweeping changes. Mandatory bias training became required for all employees, not the perfunctory kind that everyone sleeps through, but intensive, ongoing education about implicit bias, about recognizing patterns of discrimination, about creating a culture where every passenger feels valued regardless of race or class or any other category that humans use to divide ourselves. The company appointed a passenger advocacy board made up of frequent flyers from diverse backgrounds who had the power to review complaints and recommend policy changes. They hired an independent firm to audit their hiring and promotion practices, uncovering several other employees with troubling patterns who were quietly let go. Most importantly, Carter Johnson himself became visible in a way he hadn't been in years. He started flying commercial on his own airline regularly, sitting in economy talking to passengers, listening to concerns. He made his personal email available for complaints. He took the company he'd built and refocused it on the values that inspired him to start it in the first place. Dignity, respect, equity. Did these changes solve racism in the airline industry? No. Did they eliminate all discrimination from SkyReach flights? Of course not. Systemic problems require systemic solutions that take years or decades to fully implement, and even then, as long as humans are involved, bias will find ways to persist. But every person on Flight 447 was reminded that day that change is possible, that speaking up matters, that silence might be safe but it's never neutral. Some of them carried that lesson forward into other areas of their lives. Elena, the young mother, filed a discrimination complaint at her job that led to her supervisor being demoted. Sean started calling out microaggressions at work instead of swallowing them. Gift, at 70-something years old, started speaking up in situations where she would have previously stayed quiet, telling herself she was too old to start fighting battles. And Grace? Grace Johnson went to her grandmother's house and was greeted by Grandma Mariah, who held her and cried and told her how proud she was. She met Uncle Carter for the first time, this tall, well-dressed man who looked so much like photos of Grace's grandfather, and he scooped her up in a hug and wouldn't let go for a full minute, both of them crying. Carter called his sister Lena that evening, the first real conversation they'd had in years. It was awkward and painful and full of old hurts that couldn't be resolved in one phone call. But it was a start. Lena flew to Atlanta the next day, unable to stay away after hearing about what her daughter had done, and the three of them, Lena and Carter and Grace, sat in Grandma Mariah's living room and started the long process of healing a family fractured by distance and pride and hurt feelings. Grace's story spread far beyond Flight 447. She was interviewed on the news, though Lena carefully controlled which interviews she did and made sure Grace wasn't exploited or overwhelmed. She received letters from around the country, from adults who said she inspired them to speak up, from children who said she made them feel like their voices mattered too. But more than the media attention or the thank you letters or the fact that she became a minor celebrity for a few weeks, Grace carried forward the most important lesson from that flight: that when you see something wrong, staying quiet makes you part of the problem. She returned to school in Chicago with a new understanding of her own power. When Mrs. Patterson, her teacher, continued the pattern of calling on white students first, Grace raised her hand and politely but firmly asked why. When she saw a classmate being bullied in the cafeteria, she didn't walk past, she intervened. When her mother came home exhausted from dealing with discrimination at work, Grace encouraged her to file a complaint instead of just accepting it. Grace Johnson, at 9 years old, learned what many adults never learn: that individual voices matter, that courage is contagious, that justice doesn't happen by accident, it happens because someone demands it. The story of Flight 447 became shorthand in social media conversations about discrimination and speaking up. Remember Flight 447? People would write when sharing their own stories of witnessing or experiencing bias. The hashtag #BeLikeGrace trended for weeks, encouraging people to have the courage to speak up when they saw injustice. But perhaps the most important impact was the quietest. In the weeks and months after Flight 447, dozens of other people on other flights started speaking up about discriminatory treatment. They filed complaints. They called corporate offices. They refused to accept that degrading service was just the price of flying economy as a person of color. Some of their complaints led to change. Others didn't. But every voice added to a chorus that became harder to ignore. If this story moved you, if Grace's courage inspired you, then do two things right now. First, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, are what this channel is all about. Second, and this is the important one, I want you to think about a time when you witnessed something wrong and stayed silent. We've all been there. We've all had that moment where we saw injustice and calculated that speaking up wasn't worth the risk or the trouble or the confrontation. Drop a comment and tell me about it. Not to shame yourself, but to remind yourself that next time, you can make a different choice. You can be like Grace. Because that's the real message of Flight 447. It's not that a 9-year-old girl was exceptionally brave, though she was. It's that courage is available to all of us at any age and any situation. It's that speaking up is a choice we make every day, multiple times a day, whenever we witness something that violates our values or harms another human being. Grace chose to speak up. And in doing so, she showed us that the question isn't whether one voice can make a difference. The question is whether we'll use ours. Trisha Morrison faced federal charges and was convicted of discrimination. She served probation and community service, required to attend bias training and speak at workshops about her actions and their consequences. Whether she genuinely learned from the experience or simply went through the motions is unclear. Some people change when confronted with the harm they've caused. Others just become more careful about hiding their biases. Either way, she never worked in the airline industry again. SkyReach Airlines became known as one of the most progressive airlines in terms of diversity and passenger advocacy. They weren't perfect, no company is, but they became a model for how corporate accountability can happen when leadership takes complaints seriously and implements real change. Carter Johnson and Lena rebuilt their relationship slowly. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. There was too much hurt, too much time lost, too many missed moments that couldn't be recovered. But they were family, and Grace had reminded them that family matters, that distance is a choice, that it's never too late to try. And Grace? Grace grew up knowing that she had changed something, that her voice had mattered, that courage was real and possible and within her grasp. She carried that knowledge into adolescence, into adulthood, into every situation where she faced the choice between silence and speaking up. Years later, when Grace Johnson was asked in a college essay to write about a moment that defined who she became, she wrote about Flight 447. About butterscotch candies from a kind stranger named Gift. About the word fetch, and how it crystallized injustice into a single syllable. About her mother's warning to avoid trouble and her decision to cause the right kind of trouble anyway. About an uncle she'd never met who answered his phone and listened and acted. But mostly, Grace wrote about the moment she decided that staying quiet wasn't neutral, that witnessing harm and doing nothing makes you part of the problem, that courage doesn't mean not being afraid, it means being afraid and speaking up anyway. Sometimes it takes the uncomplicated moral clarity of a child to expose what adults have learned to tolerate. Grace didn't have sophisticated language about systemic racism or implicit bias or structural inequality. She just knew that what she was witnessing was wrong and someone needed to say so. So she did. And everything changed. That's the power of one voice, one phone call, one 9-year-old girl who refused to accept that cruelty was just the way things are. Grace's story spread not because it was unique, but because it was finally spoken out loud. How many other flights, how many other situations, how many other moments of casual dehumanization happen in silence because everyone makes the calculation that speaking up isn't worth it? Grace decided it was worth it. And in doing so, she reminded every person on Flight 447, and everyone who heard the story afterward, that silence is a choice, courage can come in the smallest packages, and sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one person willing to say, "This is wrong and I won't stay quiet about it." The plane has landed. The passengers have deplaned. Flight 447 is now just another aircraft being cleaned and restocked for its next journey. But the people who were on that flight, they carry the story with them. They remember. And maybe, just maybe, when they witness injustice in their own lives, they'll remember a 9-year-old girl with a phone and the courage to use it, and they'll find their own voices too. Because that's how change happens. Not all at once, not with grand gestures from powerful people, but with small acts of courage that ripple outward, inspiring others, creating a chorus of voices that refuse to stay silent. Grace Johnson taught us that. And the world is better for it.